Brave New World, Chapter 5, Section 2. Alternate Thursdays were Bernard's Solidarity Service days. After an early dinner at the Aphroditarium, to which Helmholtz had recently been elected under Rule 2, he took leave of his friend and, hailing a taxi on the roof, told the man to fly to Fordson Community Singery. The machine rose a couple of hundred feet, a couple of hundred meters, then headed eastwards, and as it turned, there, before Bernard's eyes, gigantically beautiful, was the scenery. Flood-lighted, its 320 meters of white Carrera surrogate gleamed with a snowy incandescence over Ludgate Hill. At each of the four corners of its helicopter platform, an immense T shone crimson against the night, and from the mouths of 24 vast golden trumpets rumbled a solemn synthetic music. Damn, I'm late, Bernard said to himself as he first caught sight of Big Henry, the Singery clock. And, sure enough, as he was paying off his cab, Big Henry sounded the hour. Ford! Sang out an immense bass voice from all the golden trumpets. Ford, Ford, Ford. 9 times. Bernard ran for the lift. The great auditorium for Ford's Day celebrations and other massed community sings was at the bottom of the building. Above it, 100 to each floor, were the even thousand rooms used by solidarity groups for their fortnight services. Bernard dropped down to floor 33, hurried along the corridor, stood hesitating for a moment outside room 3210, then, having wound himself up, opened the door and walked in. Thank Ford, he was not the last. 3 chairs of the 12 arranged round the circle table were still unoccupied. He slipped into the nearest of them as inconspicuously as he could and prepared to frown at the yet later comers whenever they should arrive. Turning towards him, "What were you playing this afternoon?" the girl on his left inquired. "Obstacle or electromagnetic?" Bernard looked at her. "Ford, it was Morgana Rothschild." And blushingly he had to admit that he had been playing neither. Morgana stared at him with astonishment. There was an awkward silence. Then pointedly she turned away and addressed herself to the more sporting man on her left. A good beginning for a solidarity service, thought Bernard miserably, and foresaw for himself yet another failure to achieve atonement. If only he had given himself time to look around instead of scuttling for the nearest chair, he could have sat between Fifi Bradlaugh and Joanna Diesel, instead of which he had gone and blindly planted himself next to Morgana Ford. Those black eyebrows of hers, that the eyebrow rather, for they met above the nose. Ford, and on the right was Clara Dettering. True, Clara's eyebrows didn't meet, but she was really too pneumatic, whereas Fifi and Joanna were absolutely right. Plump, blonde, not too large, and it was that great lout, Tom Kawaguchi, who now took the seat between them. The last arrival was Sarhini Engels. "You're late," said the president of the group severely. "Don't let it happen again." Saroyini apologized and slid into her place between Jem Bokanovsky and Herbert Bakunin. The group was now complete. The solidarity circle perfect and without flaw. Man, woman, man, in a ring of endless alternate round the table. 12 of them ready to be made one, waiting to come together, to be fused, to lose their 12 separate identities in a larger being. The president stood up, made the sign of the T, and switching on the synthetic music, let loose the soft, indefatigable beating of drums and a choir of instruments, near wind and superstring, that plangently repeated and repeated the brief and unescapably haunting melody of the first solidarity hymn, again, again. And it was not that it, and it was not the ear that heard the pulsing rhythm, it was the midriff, the wail and clang of those recurring harmonies or haunted, not the mind, but the yearning bowels of compassion. The president made another sign of the T and sat down. The service had begun. The dedicated Soma tablets were placed in the center of the table. The loving cup of strawberry ice cream Soma was passed from hand to hand, and with the formula, I drink to my annihilation, 12, 12 times qualified. Then, to the accompaniment of the synthetic orchestra, the first solidarity hymn was sung. Forward, we are 12, O make us one. Like drops within the social river, O make us now together run, as swiftly as thy shining fiver. 12 yearning stanzas, and then the loving cup was passed a second time. I drink to the greater being, was now the formula. All drank. Timelessly the music played, the drums beat, the crying and clashing of the harmonies were an obsession in the melted bowels. The second solidarity hymn was sung. Come, greater being, social friend, annihilating 12 in one. We long to die, for when we end, our larger life has but begun. Again, 12 stanzas. By this time, the Soma had begun to work. Eyes shone, cheeks were flushed, and the inner light of universal benevolence broke out on every face in happy, friendly smiles. Even Bernard felt himself a little melted. When Morgana Rothschild turned and beamed at him, he did his best to beam back, but the eyebrow, that black two in one, alas, it was still there. He couldn't ignore it. Couldn't, however hard he tried. The melting hadn't gone far enough. Perhaps if he had been sitting between Fifi and Joanna, for the third time the loving cup went round. I drink to the imminence of his coming, said Morgana Rothschild, whose turn it happened to be to initiate the circular rite. Her tone was loud, exultant. She drank and passed the cup to Bernard. I drink to the imminence of his coming, he repeated, with a sincere attempt to feel that the coming was imminent. But the eyebrow continued to haunt him, and the coming, so far as he was concerned, was horribly remote. He drank and handed the cup to Clara, dettering. It'll be a failure again, he said to himself. I know it will. But he went on doing his best to beam. The loving cup had made its circuit. Lifting his hand, the president gave a signal. The chorus broke out into the third solidarity hymn. Feel how the greater being comes. Rejoice, and in rejoicing die. Melt in